Welcome everybody to 33 on Gen Z, which today's topic is a 33-minute conversation of the characteristics of Gen Z. Essentially, this is the research of what makes this generation, how it's distinguished from other generations and those kinds of things. The goal is to get you information, get you research, to be able to help figure out how do we best reach this group of kids with the gospel. So this is not a lot of answers of how to do that. This is just the information to get us to that point. So here we have, who is Gen Z? There is talk, we know they're born somewhere in the mid-90s. There is argument about whether it's 1995, 1997, or 1999. We probably won't know for a while. It almost doesn't matter, because any one of those years means they are in our middle schools and in our high schools and in our colleges. So this is actually our group of kids that we're ministering to right now. And we don't 100% know when this generation ends. There is some talk of 2015, but again, we just won't know for a while. This is just gonna be our group for a little bit. This is the largest generation in the history of the United States. It's 69 to 70 million people, which marketers are one of the main groups of people that are researching this generation, because that number of people means lots of money. And so there's calculated of like $44 billion of spending money in this generation. So they're like really targeting this group of kids. This is the most diverse generation we've seen in the United States, meaning that more than half is non-white. I haven't done the digging to find out what the exact percentages are in that, and there's not a lot of people that are offering that information, but we do know this. Because of that, when we talk about this generation, this research for this group of kids, this generation, crosses racial, ethnic, socioeconomic status lines in so many places, and all that has to do with smartphone. But this is the most diverse generation we've seen. More than half is non-white. Here's another defining characteristic. They are post-Christian in their worldview. Think of Europe, Western Europe, mostly. And they're more likely to have religiously unaffiliated parents than previous generations. I mean, they're not raised in homes where their parents subscribe to some kind of religion. There's no religion in their parents, and then a post-Christian worldview. What does that actually mean? It means that the Bible is not a reference for them. They don't have biblical knowledge. People call it biblically illiterate. They wouldn't know how to read it and understand it, but they really don't have any knowledge about it. There's no cultural reference to biblical things because that's not in their worldview. They see overarching views are saying this generation is more likely to see Jesus as completely irrelevant to their day-to-day life, and that God is more like a fairy tale or a concept that that you can create based on your own values and what you think is important. At worst, this generation views Christianity as, this is the quote, wicked and an inferior belief system. So it's not even to be not to be respected, but actually is problematic in our society. So this is some of the defining characteristics of what research is saying about Gen Z and their view in this area. Here's another piece. They're known as screenagers, is one of the terms that is being used around, that they're digital natives. What's different is millennials were raised with the internet, and that was a marker for millennials. What is marking this generation is their access to smartphones and tablets and other screens. They were handed them at such a young age that this is a language in a world that they grew up with, are very comfortable with, and are first language speakers when it comes to digital stuff. Now, with all the research I've read on the impact of smartphones and digital communication and digital relationship and all these things, there's a ton of stuff out there. But what I've come to conclude from all this is that we have very, very much underestimated the impact of smartphones on kids. I think working with Gen Z adolescents, we all would say, yeah, it's absolutely impacted them. When we start actually digging into it, what we see is it's impacted their relational dynamics, interpersonal skills, loneliness, self-esteem, anxiety, identity, and values, because of things that are shared on social media than we've ever seen before. So here's where I want to stop and ask this question. When you think about teenagers and you think about how smartphones have impacted them as this generation has entered into our clubs, what are you seeing as the impact of smartphones on them that they may not even, I mean, we could do hours and hours of just this. Now, I point this out because I did not realize actually how much I underestimated the impact of phones on this group of kids. Just as a Gen Xer, I'm like, the phone, these kids, rock and roll, sex and TV, whatever, like is rotting their brains. However, once we dig into it and go, it's created a whole subsection of culture that is impacting these kids. Our Gen Z leaders can help us understand their world a little bit more. They can be translating for us that don't understand it, or we're not native to that culture. And second, what is the good news of Christ in this culture? This is what they're living in, what's the gospel mean to them? What do they need to hear about who God is? So here we go, number 7. Safe spaces are normal, and more than that, they're expected by this group of kids. Safety is a right. I expect to be safe when I walk in the room. If I'm not safe, you have violated my right to be safe. Safety, by the way, is not a value I grew up with, and it's really hard for me to understand and get my brain around it. But that is their expectation, is you are good if you are safe. This room is safe, this classroom is safe, this camp is safe. And if you start to think back on how we have done camping, you can see how it has made its way just into our own world in that. When I was trained as a leader, I mean, how many of you have like pushed a kid off of the ropes course, or taught to push a kid off the ropes course? And now we would say, never do that. Right now the training is, don't do that. Don't make them do it if they don't want to do it. Let them control whether or not they want to be on the ropes course or not. We're going, okay, they have to feel safe about it. Even though we know they actually are safe, they have to feel safe. It impacts how we do cabin time. Again, I was trained, everyone in the cabin has to share. And now we've moved away from that to, if they feel like they want to share, they can, but don't push it. This is how we've moved into this with this group of kids. I can tell you one thing, even we decided a year ago for what that meant for games. We started this at camp. We were doing program, and we just made a decision as a program team. And I think, Johnny, you're on this call and did this also on your assignment, where we decided we were not going to pull kids by themselves up front to do a game anymore. We were going to make sure that they were called with a leader with them, and part of it was that safety piece. They needed a security blanket on stage, so we brought their leader with them. And then we actually started to implement this locally in our area, for sure at our wildlife clubs, and some in our young life clubs, and said, we're just going to go ahead and make this a shared experience up front with a leader so that the kid feels safe. Now, the side effect of that, which we didn't expect or plan on, was we had leaders who said, thank you for creating an experience that was just me and my kid up front, versus, just putting them up front and like making them the hero, which is what we were trained to do in club, has turned into putting them in an unsafe place. So this is where we see a generational cultural shift in that. This also means they would like to be safe from being offended with information they don't want to hear or that they don't agree with. So how does that now impact how we share the gospel? Okay, I'm going to pause. Impact what we do with club, what we do with camp. How does it impact how we share a gospel message? What's good news for them? And I can just share this, but one piece that I do with this end part going, what does that mean for club talks? There have been times I've just stood in front of everyone and said, I'm going to talk about something that you may not agree with me. I actually might say something that might offend you today or tonight in this club talk. But I respect you and I love you, and I believe that you're mature enough to have the conversation with me. Can we have this conversation? Almost like preempting to say, like, you may not agree with it. That doesn't mean you're not safe. It means we're going to talk about things that you maybe are uncomfortable or have never thought about or don't agree with, but you're still safe here. So sometimes it's a little bit of reframing it. But again, it's a concept that is a little foreign to me, so I'm still trying to learn what it means for our kids. I just know that I've watched it impact how we're doing ministry in a lot of ways. It started small and it's kind of built. Here's the last one I want to talk about. So Gen Z views intolerance and religion as interconnected, right? There is no such thing as tolerant religion. It's intolerant and religion go together. They would say the church, specifically Christians, are full of hypocrites. And this is like not my wording. This is pulled from studies from kids that are using these words. They do think of themselves as quote unquote open-minded. They would consider themselves the most open-minded generation that exists. And they would use that terminology a lot. Now, anyone studying from the outside looking in would say you're actually not as open-minded as you think you are because you're closed-minded to all these other ideas. But what they mean by that is they're saying they're more fully accepting of ideas and views that older generations may not have been. So that's how they're defining open-minded, not necessarily that they agree with all views and they're open to all views, but that they're open to views that are different than those who are above them. They see the church and Christianity as they would say anti-gay or anti-LGBTQ+. For this generation, there's no norm for sexual expression. 70% of Gen Z teenagers think it's definitely or probably acceptable to be born one gender but identify as another. And they see Christians as promoting like these anti-gay, intolerant like attitudes. This is their verbiage for that. Part of this intolerance is they believe and see religion as restricting your personal freedom. And once you start crossing that line of like telling me what I can do and what I can't do and all these different things, that becomes for them intolerant. You're intolerant of how I want to be, how I want to live my life. I want to choose to do what makes me happy and those kinds of things. And so that right there, submitting your life to another authority, takes away personal freedom. You take away personal freedom, you are intolerant, right? So this is the world that we live in, that they assume is true about us. When we walk in and we say, I follow Jesus Christ. This is the list that there is going through their heads of what they believe. So here's just the brief list overview. Born in the mid-90s to 2015-ish, largest generation in the history of the United States, most diverse generation in the history of the United States, post-Christian in the worldview, which is also the first time that's happened in the United States. So this is a new shift for our country too. More likely to have religiously unaffiliated parents. And that's all religions. That's not just Christianity, all religions. Like most likely to have religiously unaffiliated parents, meaning there's no belief system in their house. They are digital natives. They expect to be safe, and they have a connection between intolerance and religion for them. Just again, as the super nerd, I have my references here for you, which if you want the PowerPoint, you can pull from them all that you want to. But this is just a general overview of what this generation looks like, according to researchers, and what this distinguishes them from